When we think of the lead up to the Second World War, most will think of Austria and the Anschluss, and even more still, will think of the Sudeten crisis and then the following complete takeover of Czechoslovakia. There is one that is simply left out of the vast majority of the narratives, and even the history books, however, usually only getting a quick few lines. Perhaps this is due to its size, or perhaps it's because it didn't cause much of an international stir, but it happened either way. Let's discuss Hitler's forgotten conquest, the annexation of Memel in 1939. In 1252, the Teutonic Knights moved into the area and built a fort. They named this region Memel. From then on, the area would be under the control of some form of German state until 1918. To the Lithuanian inhabitants of the area would be called Klaipėda, as it is named today. In the German Empire period, it was the northernmost city in the entire empire. A 1910 census from the time tells us that there was 149,766 inhabitants in the territory of Memel, and that 67,345 of them chose Lithuanian as their first language. Most of these people lived in the surrounding rural areas, whilst the German majority lived in the much more modern and industrial port town. After World War I, the Treaty of Versailles removed the entire Memel territory from Germany, and it was just sort of left to stagnate whilst a permanent solution was decided. The French moved in to govern in the meantime, and both Poland and Lithuania campaigned for their right to the area, but the League of Nations didn't act at all. The most likely future for Memel seemed to be free city status, like that of Danzig on the other side of East Prussia. In an event that will be relevant later, the Poles seized Vilnius from Lithuania in 1920. According to Polish, Russian, and German census data from the previous 2 decades, only 2.6% of the population of this area was actually Lithuanian. However, it was the ancient capital of the former Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Lithuania broke off relations with Poland and appealed to the League of Nations. All efforts that Lithuania made to bring Memel into their nation failed, both with the League of Nations and with the residents themselves. No amount of economic bait made the citizens want to bite, and they were quite happy for things to remain as they were, or to one day return to Germany. All a lot of Lithuanians in the area had ever known was German rule, after all, and they saw no reason to change that. The centuries of German rule had led them to having a far more complex identity than simply just being Lithuanian. Although most spoke the Lithuanian language, many considered themselves Lithuanian Prussians instead, and most were Lutheran Protestants rather than Catholics, like their ethnic brothers in the actual Lithuanian state. The nation-state of Lithuania was also seen as backwards in both economic and cultural terms, and those making a living in the region found the idea of the Free State much more appealing. In late 1921, when the Society for Free State Memel put forward the motion of becoming a free state, 75.7% of respondents were for it, 54,000 people. This wasn't the only issue. The Lithuanians didn't even make it a majority. In the actual city itself, 92% of the residents were German, whilst 8% were Lithuanian. In the countryside, the Lithuanians were 66%, so overall, the entire region was about 50-50. In January 1923, whilst the Allies were preoccupied with the rural crisis which had flared up just days earlier, the Lithuanian government took their chance. They tried to keep their fingerprints off the following events, but it was obvious to all who was behind it. A revolt was staged under the cover of the Lithuanian Riflemen's Union, and the area was simply taken by Lithuania by force. Although shooting was ordered only as a last resort, and that the men were to behave perfectly towards civilians, 2 French soldiers and 1 German policeman died, as well as 12 of the rebels. Ultimately, the Lithuanians got their way, as the French and British thought the Lithuanians may have had Soviet support, and Poland only agreed to help militarily if the Allies were for it too. It did alienate them on the world stage, however, which wasn't going to be helpful for the Lithuanian state, which only received international recognition a year earlier anyway. The lands taken by Poland a few years earlier were quickly internationally recognised by all the major powers that mattered, and Lithuania was pretty much left politically isolated on its own until the next crisis, this time with Hitler's Germany. Adolf Hitler had dragged Germany from its wretched state before into a force to be reckoned with, and was making serious waves internationally. Most watched on as Austria united with Germany, shrugging their shoulders, since after all, it was what the majority of the people wanted. The same was the case in the Sudetenland, but the Czech government was ready to fight if necessary, and a gigantic international incident occurred, taking Europe closer to war than ever before since the Great War. It was resolved, however, but now Hitler was on thin ice. Regardless, he managed to take Memel from Lithuania quickly and easily in 1939 without too much of a stir. For years, much like Germans in the Sudetenland, the Germans in Memel had been working both openly and behind doors to become united with Germany. Hitler himself had sponsored many of these men, but ultimately none of the movements came to fruition, and only resulted in many getting thrown into jail. In response, Hitler would impose economic sanctions on Little Lithuania. One strange one, resulting in a geese crisis. Lithuania was mainly agrarian at the time, and they could now not transport their geese through Germany to the Netherlands, a big customer of theirs. The economic sanctions weren't lifted until after the annexation and would be used as bait to pressure the Lithuanians to negotiate. In early 1938, Hitler, in keeping with his goal of uniting the German people into one nation, stated that reclaiming Memel was a top priority. In March, Poland issued an ultimatum to Lithuania, demanding that they reopen diplomatic negotiations, which had been broken ever since the war in 1920. Lithuania backed down. Still in 1938, Germany demanded that Lithuania allow the pro-German groups in the area political freedom, as they were currently being persecuted, but the memorandum was simply ignored. In the 1925 elections, 94% of the voters, including many Lithuanians, had voted for the German parties. The Lithuanian dictatorship simply refused to recognise the results, and from then on, authorities would jail any seen as being guilty of, quote, preserving German heritage. Lithuania felt that they could simply ignore problems like this and claim neutrality, hoping to gain Allied sympathy. It didn't work. After seeing their fellow ethnic Germans in Austria, and in the Sudetenland, successfully cause an international scene, and managed to become united with Hitler's Germany, the Germans and so-called Prussian Lithuanians in Memel began organising public demonstrations. By now, the writing seemed on the wall that Germany was going to get what they wanted, either by force or by diplomacy. And what could little Lithuania, isolated from the world, possibly do against Germany? She chose to negotiate. In December 1938, an internationally supervised plebiscite was held in the region, and the results were predictable. 87% of voters decided they wanted to join Hitler's Germany. Ribbentrop and Hitler tried to sweeten the deal to make things go down better for the Lithuanian government with their public. The offer was similar to that offered to Poland over Danzig. A railway would be established to connect Memel to Lithuania through German territory exclusively for the Lithuanians to use. Once the land was given back to Germany, the Lithuanians were allowed to employ their own dock workers and administrative personnel at the harbour, and the Lithuanian population's rights would be guaranteed. On the 12th of March, Lithuanian Foreign Minister Erbsis was at Pope Pius VII's coronation in Rome. On the way home, he stopped off in Berlin to clarify rumours that Germany was planning to take over Memel using military force. He met with Ribbentrop on the 20th, and during a 40-minute conversation, Erbsis was essentially given what has been described as a verbal ultimatum that Memel be returned to Germany. He returned home to discuss it with his government. Whilst the Lithuanians were thinking things over, Hitler moved 3 divisions to the Lithuanian border to perhaps make them hurry up. For some reason, in response, Poland decided this was a threat against Danzig on the other side of East Prussia and mobilised the Polish army, a serious provocation at the time. Ultimately, though, on the 23rd of March, Ribbentrop and Erbsis signed the treaty in Berlin. Whilst Lithuania had tested the international waters, they found no one that would possibly offer them any real support, so they had no choice. They willingly handed over Memel. The terms went as follows. 1. Klaipeda/Memel would now be returned to Germany. 2. Lithuanian police and military will evacuate the territory. 3. A Lithuanian free port will be established for their economic needs inside of the now German Memel. 4. A mutual non-aggression pact between the two nations. Whilst the free port and some of the rights maintained by Lithuanians softened the blow, it was still a major issue for Lithuania. It was only 5% of the country, but it was by far the most important region, given that it was their only major port. 70 to 80% of foreign trade previously flowed through Memel, and now Lithuania was sent right into Germany's sphere of influence, at least until the Soviets turned up. 75% of exports were to, and 86% of imports were from, Germany. Germany later attempted to sign an anti-Polish military alliance with Lithuania, using the return of the ancient Lithuanian capital as bait, but they declined. Lithuania staunchly stuck to their neutrality policy, and in the end, this did not save them. In just over a year, the Baltic states were swallowed up by the Soviet Union, and full independence would not be gained until 1990. Lithuania would be the first republic to do so, and within 2 years, the Soviet Union fell. Memel today is again named Klaipeda, and obviously is once again part of Lithuania. Instead of a German majority, the area now has a Lithuanian majority and a Russian minority. Not surprising, given that Kaliningrad is next door, and that during the Soviet era, mass Russian colonization took place, causing issues to this day. The city was basically abandoned by the end of the war, and pretty much all the Germans, as well as a lot of Lithuanians alike, fled west when the Soviets were approaching. As a result, there is not a German population to speak of at all in the city today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this shorter kind of video, compared to my normal long ones. The original plan was to post 2 this week, before the Hitler one this weekend, but I've been about as ill as I've ever been, so I only just managed to make this one. A special thank you as always to my patrons. If you do want to join our Discord or our weekly Hearts of Iron 4 games, or if you simply just want to support the channel, please consider clicking the link in the description to help for as little as $2 a month. Any amount helps more than you can imagine. Thank you to Lobster to You, Darway Lolalol, Sigmar, Emperor Titus, Luke David Murphy, Chechen Natsog, Anton Bergland, Levi E, Lanza, Friendly Brian, Bushak, Firefly Enterprise, and Henry Unruh.